What if everything you think you know about money is a lie? We grow up believing money is simple. A piece of paper, a number in a bank account, a gold coin stored somewhere far away that guarantees its worth. But beneath the surface, money has never truly been about paper or gold or numbers. It has always been something else, something far more powerful. Money is not a material object. It is not even a fixed thing. Money is energy, and once you begin to see it this way, everything changes. Think about it. Civilizations have risen and collapsed, not because their armies failed, but because their currencies lost meaning. In Weimar Germany, people carried wheelbarrows full of cash, but that paper couldn't buy them a single loaf of bread. In Zimbabwe, entire savings vanished overnight. Not because the ink on the notes disappeared, but because belief in that ink evaporated. The collapse wasn't about the object, it was about the energy behind it, the trust that held it together. This is the first uncomfortable truth. Money only exists because we believe it does. Without our shared faith, without our collective imagination, the entire system disintegrates. That means money has always been less about finance and more about psychology. Less about metal and paper, more about perception and power. But who shapes that perception? Who decides what a piece of paper or a number on a screen is worth? Who directs the flow of this invisible energy that governs nearly every decision we make? Most of us live trapped in a story we didn't write. We work, we save, we spend, believing money is a neutral tool. But look closely. Money is not neutral. It is the greatest lever of control in human history. Governments have used it to finance wars, to pacify populations, to expand empires. Elites have used it to enslave nations, not with chains, but with debt. And ordinary people, generation after generation, have been conditioned to chase it, fear it, and worship it without ever questioning what it truly is. Here is the unsettling reality. Money is not a possession. It is a mirror, a reflection of our consciousness, our fears, our trust, and our collective story. That's why it flows in some directions and not in others. That's why wealth pools in the hands of a few, while scarcity traps billions. The system is not broken. It is designed to operate this way, designed to channel energy from the many into the hands of the few. History is filled with clues. Empires, like Rome, debased their coins when their power began to falter, stripping value not from metal, but from belief. In the 1970s, when the gold standard collapsed, the dollar did not disappear. It simply shifted its foundation from metal to trust, from physical substance to invisible faith. Every paycheck you've earned since then has been built on nothing more than agreement. On a story so fragile, it could collapse the moment people stop believing in it. And yet, we rarely stop to ask the obvious question. If money is not real in the way we've been taught, then what is it really? If money is energy, then how does it move? Who controls its current? And how can we learn to master it instead of being mastered by it? This is the journey we are about to take. To unmask the illusions, to trace the hidden history, and to confront the uncomfortable truth that money is not just an external object, but an internal force, one that shapes not only our economies, but our very perception of life itself. Because until you understand what money truly is, you will always remain a prisoner of the story written for you. But once you see through the illusion, you begin to realize something radical. Money is not outside of you. It has always been inside you. Long before paper bills, glowing screens, or even coins, wealth existed as something far more primal: exchange. In the earliest human communities, survival depended not on abstract symbols, but on direct trade. One hunter brought meat, another offered tools, another gathered fruit. This was the barter system, simple in theory, yet fragile in practice. What if the man with grain did not want your fish? What if the blacksmith had no use for your goat? The flow of exchange stalled because desires were not aligned. Humanity needed something more flexible, something that could act as a bridge between needs. So came the first great leap, objects of shared belief. In Mesopotamia, over 5,000 years ago, clay tokens were used to represent goods. Small, meaningless pieces of baked earth became symbols of value because entire communities agreed to the story attached to them. The object was not important. The agreement was. The same truth carried forward with the rise of coins. The Lydians, an ancient people in modern-day Turkey, created the first stamped coins of gold and silver around 600 BC. But again, the value of these coins was never just in the metal. It was in the emblem stamped upon them, the authority of the ruler who declared, "This is worth something because I say so." A coin was less a piece of metal than a declaration of power, a compact of trust between rulers and subjects. When the Romans expanded their empire, coins became propaganda tools. Emperors stamped their faces and victories onto currency, circulating not only wealth, but identity, order, and authority. Every coin carried a psychological weight. It reminded the people who ruled them. Money was no longer just a medium of trade. It was a medium of belief, shaping how citizens saw their empire and themselves. Centuries later, paper money appeared in China during the Temse and Song dynasties. At first, merchants used promissory notes because carrying heavy coins across long distances was impractical. But soon, these slips of paper gained an extraordinary power. They were backed not by gold, not by silver, but by collective faith that they could be redeemed. Paper itself was worthless. Yet, through trust, it became as valuable as the treasures it represented. This transformation revealed a deeper truth. Money's power rests not in the object, but in the story attached to it. By the time Europe adopted paper currency, the system had matured into something more abstract. Central banks emerged as gatekeepers of trust. They held gold reserves and issued notes supposedly redeemable for that gold. But history shows that this link was always fragile. The gold standard, celebrated as stability itself, eventually collapsed under the weight of wars, debts, and political ambitions. In 1971, when the United States abandoned gold altogether, the world entered the era of fiat money, currency backed not by metal, not by land, not by tangible wealth, but by nothing more than government decree and human belief. Think about the audacity of that. A piece of paper in your wallet or a number on your banking app has no inherent worth. It is not edible. It cannot shelter you. It cannot clothe you. Its value lives entirely in the collective imagination. And yet, wars are fought for it, lives are spent chasing it, and societies are built upon it. This is the paradox at the heart of money. Worthless in itself, priceless in its effect. Every step in money's evolution reveals the same underlying truth. Wealth has always been a story. From clay tokens to Roman coins, from paper notes to digital codes, the substance has changed, but the essence has not. It is belief, trust, and shared imagination that transform an empty symbol into a force capable of building empires or destroying them. And those who understood this truth, the priests, the kings, the bankers, the corporations, were the ones who learned how to shape the story. They became the storytellers of value, the architects of trust, the invisible authors of human exchange. Everyone else simply played along. When you hold money today, you are not holding an object. You are holding a story centuries in the making, a story that only exists because we all continue to believe in it. And this belief, this fragile current of shared imagination, is the foundation upon which the modern world stands. We are taught to think of money as something fixed, as if it is a thing that can be held, stored, and measured. But this is a misunderstanding, a dangerous illusion. Money is not static. It is not a pile of gold or a stack of bills frozen in time. Money is movement. It is circulation. It is energy. Consider this. Electricity does not exist in a battery. for its own sake. Its purpose is in the flow, in the current that passes through wires, lighting homes, powering machines, fueling life. When it sits still, it is potential. When it moves, it becomes power. Money functions in the same way. A coin in your pocket, a number sitting idle in a bank account. These are dormant. Only when they move, when they are exchanged, invested, directed toward creation, do they generate force. Asterisk, this is why wealth is often described as a current, a currency. Its power comes not from being hoarded, but from being circulated, transferred, multiplied. The poor often think of money as something to keep, to cling to protect. The wealthy understand money as something to move, to direct, to channel. Just as stagnant water breeds decay, while flowing rivers sustain life. Stagnant money creates fear, while flowing money generates growth. But this truth goes even deeper. Money is not only energy in a mechanical sense, it mirrors human consciousness itself. Wherever attention goes, energy flows. And wherever energy flows, money tends to follow. Look at the industries that dominate any era. They are the ones that capture the world's attention. Centuries ago, attention was fixed on land and agriculture, and so wealth flowed into landowners' hands. In the industrial age, factories and machines captured attention, and wealth flowed to industrialists. Today, attention is locked onto screens, digital platforms, and virtual experiences. And so wealth flows into the hands of those who own the algorithms, the data, the networks. Money follows attention because attention is energy. A simple truth lies behind every empire and every fortune. Those who direct collective attention, direct collective wealth. This principle is not merely economic, but psychological. People who live with a scarcity mindset see money as something external, scarce, and hostile. They hoard what little they have, radiating fear, and that fear contracts opportunity. In contrast, those with an abundance mindset treat money as an extension of themselves, as energy that flows through their choices, relationships, and creativity. This does not mean blind optimism or naive positivity, means understanding that money reflects states of mind. It mirrors trust, openness, and intention. If you see the world as full of opportunity, you act in ways that attract opportunity. If you see the world as full of threat, you act in ways that repel it. Money, as energy, flows according to those internal states. This is not mysticism. It is psychology, confirmed by centuries of human behavior. Entrepreneurs who believe in possibility take risks, create networks, and open new markets. Those paralyzed by fear cling to the familiar, missing chances as they pass by. Nations to operate on this principle. Countries that project trust, innovation, and stability attract investment, while those consumed by fear, corruption, or instability repel it. Energy follows belief, and money follows energy. Across cultures, this truth has been intuited long before modern economics. In Eastern traditions, life itself is seen as energy ki in China, prana in India. These philosophies recognize that energy must flow for life to thrive. Blockages create illness, stagnation, and weakness. In the same way, when money is blocked by fear, by inequality, by systems designed to trap it in the hands of a few, societies weaken, individuals suffer, and decay spreads. Physics offers the same lesson. Energy is never destroyed, it only transforms. When one system loses energy, another gains it. When one person spends, another receives. When money leaves your hand, it does not vanish, it moves. It changes form. It continues its journey. Seeing money as energy forces us to abandon the illusion of loss, and instead to recognize transformation. What leaves you in one form may return in another. This perspective shatters the myth of making money or losing money. No one truly creates it from nothing, and no one truly destroys it. Instead, money moves, flows, transforms. It can be directed, attracted, channeled, but never truly owned in the way we imagine. To believe otherwise is to misunderstand its nature. Think of the wealthiest individuals in history. They did not merely accumulate, they directed currents. They built systems, whether railroads, oil empires, tech platforms, or financial networks, that positioned them as hubs in the flow of monies, energy. Their wealth was not a pile of coins. It was the constant circulation of value through systems they controlled. Now think of the systems that dominate your own life. Credit cards, mortgages, loans, digital subscriptions, all of these are energy channels. Each one directs flow, often away from you and toward larger systems of power. And yet most people treat these flows passively, without awareness. They live as though money is something that simply happens to them, rather than something they can interact with consciously. But awareness changes everything. Once you see money as energy, you begin to see how your choices, beliefs, and actions either open channels or close them. Fear closes them. Creativity opens them. Resentment blocks them. Gratitude widens them. This is not fantasy. It is the subtle psychology that has separated those who thrive from those who remain trapped. Imagine your life as a circuit. Your skills, relationships, and mindset are the wiring. Money is the current. If the wiring is broken, the current cannot flow. If the wiring is intact, energy circulates naturally. The wealthiest individuals are not always the most talented or the most intelligent. They are the ones who build circuits that allow money's energy to move through them. This understanding is the forgotten truth of money. It is not about hoarding, not about static possession, but about aligning yourself with a flow that has existed since the dawn of civilization. Once you shift your perception, money ceases to be an external tyrant and becomes an internal ally. It is not outside of you, separate and foreign. It is energy, reflecting your choices, your attention, your beliefs. The question then becomes not how do I get money, but how do I align with its flow? Because wealth, like electricity, does not need to be invented. It already exists, waiting to be channeled. And those who understand this truth, those who treat money not as matter, but as energy, are the ones who stop chasing wealth and instead learn how to generate it, direct it, and live in harmony with it. If money is energy, then psychology is the circuitry through which it flows. How we think about money, how we feel about it shapes its movement in ways most of us never realize. The greatest divide is not between the rich and the poor, but between two mental universes, scarcity and abundance. Scarcity is born of fear. It whispers that there is never enough, that every gain by one person is a loss for another, that life itself is a battle of limited resources. Those who live in scarcity cling tightly to what little they have, even when that clinging prevents growth. It is the mindset of contraction, of holding, of resisting flow. Money becomes a source of stress rather than freedom, a symbol of survival rather than creation. Abundance, by contrast, is rooted in trust. It is not naive optimism, but the recognition that opportunities multiply when acted upon, that wealth expands when it is circulated. Those with an abundance mindset see money not as a wall that separates the rich from the poor, but as a bridge that allows energy, creativity, and opportunity to flow. They treat money as a partner rather than a master, as something to be directed rather than feared. History gives us stark examples of these two mindsets at work. The Great Depression scarred an entire generation with the psychology of scarcity. Families who lived through bank collapses and breadlines carried the trauma forward, even when times improved. Children grew up watching parents stash coins under mattresses, terrified of banks, mistrustful of spending. Decades later, many of those families still lived as though ruin were only a breath away, long after economic recovery had taken place. Scarcity had become internalized, a shadow carried through generations. Compare that to the psychology of hyperinflation in Zimbabwe in the early 2000s. where currency lost value so rapidly that bills were printed in trillion-dollar denominations. In such moments, scarcity and abundance collide in strange ways. Fear dominated as savings evaporated overnight, but for those who adapted quickly, trading in goods, using alternative currencies, or building networks of barter opportunity appeared amidst collapse. Where scarcity paralyzed many, a few navigated the chaos by treating money not as fixed value, but as a current to be redirected. And today, we see the scars of psychological programming in modern debt cycles. Millions live paycheck to paycheck, not because money does not flow in, but because fear and impulse drive it immediately back out. Behavioral economics shows us that fear-based spending, panic buying, gambling on quick wins, hoarding goods during crises is not rational. It is survival programming misapplied to a modern economy. The same instincts that once kept tribes alive during famines now lead individuals into spirals of debt and despair. Scarcity shrinks the horizon of possibility. When the mind is gripped by fear of loss, creativity collapses. Decisions are made defensively, not expansively. Opportunities are ignored because the risk feels unbearable. Relationships suffer because every interaction is framed as competition. This is why scarcity thinking traps not only individuals, but entire societies. When collective fear dominates, economies contract, trust evaporates, and systems of control grow stronger. Abundance, on the other hand, expands the horizon. It invites experimentation, innovation, and collaboration. When people believe there is enough, they share more freely, invest more boldly, and create more willingly. Action becomes less about avoiding loss and more about generating possibility. The flow of money responds accordingly, expanding into new ventures, ideas, and systems. But here is the crucial truth. Abundance is not about blind positivity or ignoring hardship. It is about perception dictating action. If you believe the world is collapsing, you act in ways that reinforce collapse. If you believe opportunities exist, you act in ways that reveal them. Money, as energy, mirrors these choices. Fear contracts flow. Belief expands it. This is why two people can live in the same circumstances, earn the same salary, and yet experience radically different financial realities. One operates from fear, hoarding every penny, shrinking from risk, and slowly suffocating under the weight of anxiety. The other, with the same resources, directs money with intention, invests in relationships, takes calculated risks, and finds doors opening. The external conditions are identical, but the internal circuitry could not be more different. Scarcity and abundance are not just economic categories. They are psychological lenses through which reality itself is filtered. And because money is energy, it flows according to those lenses. The Great Depression, Zimbabwe's hyperinflation, today's debt traps all remind us that when fear dominates perception, collapse follows. Yet when trust, creativity, and vision dominate, renewal becomes possible. To shift from scarcity to abundance is not to ignore reality, but to rewire it. It is to recognize that while resources may be finite, human potential is not. That opportunities are not discovered by those who wait, but created by those who act. That wealth is not hoarded in vaults, but generated in the circulation of energy between minds, hands, and hearts. The truth is simple. Scarcity breeds control, while abundance breeds freedom. Scarcity is the mindset through which institutions manipulate populations, keeping them dependent, fearful, and divided. Abundance is the mindset through which individuals reclaim agency, refusing to live in chains of psychological poverty. Understanding this divide is the beginning of liberation, because once you see how your internal state shapes your financial reality, you realize that money is not something outside of you. It is a mirror, reflecting the depth of your trust, the expansiveness of your vision, the courage of your choices. Fear contracts it. belief expands it, and history has always belonged to those who dared to believe in more. If money is energy, then the question becomes unavoidable. Who controls its flow? Energy is never neutral. It can light a city, or it can power a weapon. And just as electricity, grids are owned by corporations and governments. The grid of money, the global system through which wealth flows, is not free, not neutral, and not designed for the prosperity of all. It is designed, and has always been designed, for control. To understand this, we must step back into history. Take the Rothschild banking dynasty of the 18th and 19th centuries. Through a network of banks spread across Europe, the Rothschilds mastered not just the accumulation of wealth, but the orchestration of financial power. They financed wars, brokered treaties, and extended loans to governments that could not function without their credit. Kings and emperors, once the ultimate symbols of authority, found themselves dependent on bankers. The Rothschilds understood that true power was not in owning land or armies, but in controlling the financial bloodstream that fed them. This pattern has only grown more sophisticated. In the United States, the Federal Reserve stands as the prime example of a hidden hand guiding the current. Created in 1913, the Federal Reserve was sold to the public as a safeguard against instability. In reality, it became a private banking consortium with the authority to issue currency, set interest rates, and dictate the terms of credit. Most citizens live under the illusion that the government prints money. In truth, the government borrows it at interest from the Federal Reserve, a structure that ensures perpetual debt. Every dollar in circulation is born as a loan. Debt is not a bug of the system. It is the system. Internationally, the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank extend this model on a global scale. Under the banner of development loans, entire nations are locked into cycles of repayment. When a struggling country accepts a loan, it does so under strict conditions: privatize industries, slash social spending, open markets to foreign corporations. These policies often benefit outside investors far more than local populations. When countries fail to meet repayment demands, natural resources, public infrastructure, and even political sovereignty are quietly seized. What looks like aid is, in reality, a sophisticated form of economic colonization. The energy of money then flows not freely, but through pipelines engineered by institutions whose interests rarely align with the individual. Just as an electricity grid is vulnerable to blackouts if a single switch is flipped, so too can economies collapse when central banks adjust rates or when speculators manipulate markets. This is not theory, it is lived reality. The 2008 financial crisis showed how trillions could evaporate, not because resources disappeared, but because confidence was withdrawn. Fear, leveraged by the few, rippled across the globe, leaving ordinary people bankrupt while the architects of the collapse were bailed out. And how is such control maintained? Not by brute force alone, but by propaganda. The psychology of money, the beliefs we explored earlier, is carefully cultivated by media, education, and advertising. From childhood, people are taught to equate financial success with virtue, debt with shame, and consumerism with identity. Corporations spend billions engineering desire, not simply to sell products, but to keep individuals in a perpetual state of want. Banks and governments rely on this cycle. For a population that saves too much, questions too deeply, or withdraws from consumption threatens the entire system's momentum. Consider the subtle messages we are fed. The news cycle conditions us to panic over market downturns as if they were natural disasters, reinforcing the belief that only experts, central banks, economists, financial elites can restore order. Movies and advertising glorify wealth as status, but rarely reveal the machinery of its creation. Even debt itself is reframed as opportunity. Credit cards promise freedom. Mortgages promise belonging. Student loans promise a future. But beneath the sheen lies dependency. You do not own the house. The bank does. You do not own your future. Your labor is already mortgaged to the institution that financed it. This is how power operates in the modern age, no longer through chains and whips, but through contracts and interest rates. No longer through open conquest, but through the quiet manipulation of perception. And perhaps the most brilliant illusion of all, the idea that money is scarce because of natural forces, when in fact its scarcity is manufactured by those who regulate its flow. The deeper you look, the more unsettling the parallels become. Just as a hydroelectric dam controls the flow of water, central banks and financial institutions control the flow of money. They open the gates, and economies boom. They tighten them, and economies wither. Politicians rise and fall according to these tides, yet, behind the stage, the engineers of the current remain unseen, insulated, and untouchable. The critical question is this: if money is energy, are you using it to generate your own freedom, or are you unknowingly powering someone else's machine? Every paycheck, every loan, every transaction is a transfer of energy. But in most cases, that energy does not accumulate with the individual. It is siphoned upward through interest, fees, inflation, and taxation into structures designed to concentrate power. This is not merely an economic story. It is psychological warfare. Fear of poverty keeps workers compliant. Fear of collapse keeps citizens obedient. Fear of exclusion keeps consumers buying. Money, as energy, becomes the ultimate tool of control because it is not resisted as force, it is accepted as necessity. People willingly enter into contracts that limit their freedom, not realizing the invisible architecture that ensures their dependency. History reminds us that such systems always cloak themselves in legitimacy. Medieval serfs accepted feudalism as natural order. Colonial subjects were told they were being civilized. Today, the narrative is economic growth and stability. Terms that sound benign but mask the reality of concentration, wealth rising to the top while the majority compete over crumbs, and yet cracks appear. Cryptocurrencies emerged not merely as speculative assets, but as a rebellion against centralized control, an attempt to decentralize the money grid. Though far from perfect, they expose a critical truth: the flow of money can be real. Local currencies, community credit systems, and peer-to-peer exchanges challenge the idea that value must always pass through corporate or governmental hands. But such alternatives face fierce resistance, for those who control the current have little incentive to release their grip. The pattern is ancient. Power resides not simply in who owns the gold, but in who dictates the story of value. Kings once declared coins to bear divine authority. Today, economists and bankers declare fiat money to bear rational authority. Tomorrow, it may be digital credits tied to behavior, monitored and controlled by algorithms. In every age, the story evolves, but the structure remains. The few control the current, and the many power their grid. Recognizing this does not mean descending into despair. It means waking up to the hidden machinery of control, to the ways in which psychology, propaganda, and institutions direct the flow of energy we call money. It means asking, with sober clarity, am I shaping my relationship with money, or is my relationship with money shaping me? Because the truth is as electrifying as it is unsettling. Money, as energy, has always been free to flow, but the grid you are connected to determines whether it empowers your life, or whether your life becomes fuel for someone else's empire. If money has been used as a tool of manipulation, control, and fear, then the most radical act is not rejection, but transformation. To step outside the grip of propaganda, we must begin by rewiring our personal relationship with money. Because before money is an external system, it is an internal story. And the story you believe about it determines whether you are enslaved by it, or empowered through it. For many, money carries a shadow of fear. The fear of not having enough. The fear of losing what one has. The fear of dependence, or of exploitation. These fears are not imaginary. They have been cultivated across generations. The trauma of economic depressions, the instability of financial crashes, the suffocating weight of debt, all of these leave imprints on how people think and feel about money. Scarcity becomes not just an economic reality, but a psychological prison. And yet, the paradox is that the energy of money responds to this prison. Fear constricts flow. Resentment blocks opportunity. Worship blinds one to manipulation. The first step, then, is neutrality. To see money not as God or demon, but as current, like water, like electricity, like breath. Water can drown, but it can also nourish. Fire can burn, but it can also warm. Money, too, is neutral energy, shaped by the intention and wisdom of the one who directs it. This shift in perception dissolves both blind attachment and corrosive hatred. From neutrality comes awareness. Every financial decision is also an emotional decision. Why do we spend impulsively when anxious? Why do we hoard when uncertain? Why do we measure our worth in digits rather than depth? By bringing these triggers into light, we begin to reclaim agency. Instead of reacting to money, we choose how to flow with it. Behavioral economists remind us that most financial mistakes are not rational errors, but emotional ones. Awareness is the antidote. Once awareness is established, the next practice is circulation. Hoarding money out of fear is like damming a river. It stagnates. Recklessly scattering money without intention is like pouring water into sand. It disappears. True wealth is built by circulation, by allowing money to move through networks of value, creativity, and exchange. This does not mean careless spending, but deliberate flow, investing in skills that grow, in communities that support, in systems that return. Circulation multiplies energy because it keeps the current alive. This leads to building systems of flow rather than chasing fragments of gain. Most people are trained to think of money in terms of isolated transactions: earn, spend, save. But real wealth emerges when those fragments are connected into patterns. A skill becomes a service becomes a network becomes a system. The wealthy do not think in terms of singular moments. They think in terms of systems that generate continuous circulation. The artist who owns their rights, the entrepreneur who builds infrastructure, the community that creates mutual credit. All of these shift from being passive recipients of money to active generators of flow. And this process is not exploitation or luck. It is alignment. It is the decision to stop treating money as an enemy or master, and instead to collaborate with it as energy. Just as one learns to harness electricity without worshiping it, one can harness money without being ruled by it. When money is aligned with creativity, integrity, and contribution, it becomes not a chain, but a current of freedom. The transformation is subtle, yet profound. Scarcity whispers, "There will never be enough." Abundance responds, "Flow creates more." Scarcity contracts, hoards, and isolates. Abundance expands, invests, and connects. And because money is a mirror of human psychology, this internal shift reverberates outward. The same circumstances viewed through scarcity become walls. Viewed through abundance, they become doors. Rewiring your relationship with money does not mean ignoring its manipulations or denying its dangers. It means refusing to carry those dangers within your own mind. It means refusing to play the role of powerless participant in a game designed by others. It means reclaiming the one space of control that cannot be seized. The story you tell yourself about what money is and what it can be. For centuries, financial empires have thrived on shaping collective belief. The most radical form of resistance is shaping your own, because when enough individuals rewire their perception, the larger story begins to shift. And from that shift, entirely new systems can emerge. Money as energy has always been with us. The question is not whether it controls you, but whether you will choose to flow with it consciously. In the end, Empowerment lies not in rejecting money, but in mastering the relationship so that you are no longer a cog in someone else's grid, but a generator in your own. Every empire that has risen, and every empire that has fallen, has been built on one simple truth. Wealth does not exist outside of human beings. Gold, coins, paper, and digital numbers are illusions that hold meaning only because people agree to them. Strip away the symbols, and what remains is the undeniable generator of wealth, human energy. Think about it. A field of wheat has no value until someone decides to plant, harvest, and transform it into bread. Oil in the ground is nothing but black liquid until human ingenuity refines it into fuel. Even the most advanced technologies, the skyscrapers that pierce the sky, the global corporations that move billions, none of them exist without the spark of human intention. Money is not the cause, it is the consequence. It flows because people imagine, act, and believe. This is why the final revelation is not about the systems that control money, but about the current that creates it. That current is you. Your labor, your creativity, your trust, your willingness to engage in exchange. All of these are the electricity that powers the grid of civilization. Without it, every empire is nothing but dust and paper. The irony is that for centuries, power structures have tried to make you forget this. They condition you to believe that wealth is something bestowed by authority, something distributed from above, something you must chase or beg for. But the truth is far more radical. Money does not exist without human participation. It is not imposed upon you, it emerges from you. When you walk into a store and hand over a bill, you are affirming the collective story. When you agree to work for a wage, you are lending your energy to a larger system. When you invest in an idea, you are redirecting current into a new channel. Every action you take with money is not passive, it is generative. You are not a spectator of the financial system. You are its beating heart. And so, the ultimate question is no longer, what is money, or who controls it? The question is, what story of wealth are you choosing to live? If you see money as scarce, your actions will reflect contraction, and scarcity will echo back. If you see money as neutral energy, your actions will create flow, and flow will expand. The grid responds not to what you wish for, but to the current you generate. This is the paradox that both liberates and terrifies. You have always been the source. Just as electricity requires a generator, the money grid requires human beings. Without you, the system collapses. With you, it thrives. That realization alone reclaims power from the faceless institutions and returns it to where it has always belonged, within human intention. To understand this is to step beyond fear. It is to stop seeing wealth as something hoarded in vaults or manipulated by elites, and to recognize that their power depends entirely on the belief and participation of billions of individuals. You are not powerless within this system. You are indispensable to it. Wealth has never been about paper. It has never been about numbers glowing on a screen. It has always been about energy, and energy flows through you. You are not outside the current. You are the current. And when enough people awaken to this truth, history itself begins to bend. Because the moment you recognize that wealth begins with you, you stop being a cog in someone else's design, and you become the architect of your own. The story of money has always been the story of human energy, and the final chapter is waiting to be written by you.